first story you want to flag is how fraudsters are getting access to our details and then in some cases using them to upgrade their phones at our expense.
If a fraudster has access to your credit bureau information, as many do, unfortunately, and this is the message I'm trying to drive home over and over to consumers, is that it's a horrible thought, but thanks to several massive data breaches in recent years, TransUnion and Experian being among them, our credit bureau information, addresses, phone numbers, account information, ID numbers, you name it, is available to fraudsters via the dark web. Okay. And many of them use it to impersonate us. They do need, in terms of getting into our bank accounts, they do need us to hand over what the industry calls the keys to the safe in terms of logins and one-time pins and that kind of thing. So you have to be wise to the phishing call where they try and trick you into giving that detail. But what makes people fall for it, many people, is because the fraudsters begin by saying, they have your name, they have your ID, they can say things like, oh, we see you don't use your credit card often, but there's now been a fraud attempt. And people say to me, so how else would they have the information? It had to have been my bank. Well, they have it because our information is out there. And in most cases, well, certainly to get directly into your account, they need your help through social engineering via phone in most cases. But when it comes to opening an account in our name, and it happened to me once a few years ago, I was actually about to go on air, 702, our sister station, and I got an SMS saying there's an account application, Sheet Street it was, I still remember, is this you, press Y or N? And I said definitely N. And because I deal with all companies through work, I then went and said, I would like to know what information was presented. And it was all my credit bureau information, including some outdated numbers, but that was all there on my credit record. Gosh. So I knew. So, we're not immune. Don't think that you're immune. So that's the first, and then that information, the fact that our basic information is available to fraudsters thanks to data breaches is quite central to this story, and that's why I mention it. Okay, so having access to our credit bureau information, somebody can open an account, in this case a cell phone account, take out a contract, and get the very expensive phone. They're going to choose only the best, of course, right? In this case, a 45,000 Rand phone, and have it couriered to them. It's not going to be their actual address. Obviously, they're not that stupid, but off the phone goes to them, and you're left paying for it every month, right? So this is exactly what happened to Louis of Sea Point. He posted about his experience of this and trying to deal with MTN afterwards when the fraud came to light. About a month ago, he posted on Twitter, X, and he wrote, MTN opens a fraudulent contract in my name with no supporting documents, not an ID, absolutely nothing. They admit the process wasn't followed. They can't prove that it was me at all, but I have to spend time and money to prove that it wasn't me or get threatened to be credit listed.
Sure.
Blacklisted. And then he posted a response, a screenshot of a response he got from an MTN official, which read, the issue here, because now he was pushing back at having to jump through the hoops, right? The issue here is not how your account was opened. Fraud happens in all aspects of business. The phone they took is expensive, which will make your bill accumulate quickly, and that will hurt your credit profile. Please send us the relevant documents so that this issue can be investigated by the relevant department and your case closed.
Wow. I would be irate if I got that message saying the issue isn't that the account was opened by fraud. Of course, I would be frothing at mouth.
Yeah, and Louis was, because he wanted to know. He was told that no documents were presented. Okay, and he's going, but if I walk into a shop and want to take out a contract, and incidentally, Louis is not a bona fide MTN client. He is on paper because the fraudster impersonated him. But
he's never had a relationship with them before.
No.
Okay.
So I don't know if he just doesn't currently have his own one.
But I mean, the point is, if he had wanted to, if he had walked into an MTN store
That's
and said, I want to take out a phone contract.
We've all done that. You have to supply a lot of information.
You would have been just about a DNA sample. You have a lot of hoops to jump through.
Exactly.
So how is it possible that somebody did that so easily?
He was very much interested in that. And that's where the sort of backwards and forwards happened, because he wanted to know that. They weren't giving him satisfactory answers, in his opinion. And they were saying, look, this is the process. Send us your copy of your ID and go to the police station and get an affidavit saying what happened. And he's like, why should I? You didn't protect me. Why should I have to do all this? And then, of course, the situation stalls because companies have these protocols, these fraud investigated protocols, and you have to do it. It's like when people complain of rotten food or whatever, and then the company wants to uplift and they don't want to give it. And I'm like,
sample,
you can't have it both ways. Keep a sample for yourselves and hand it over. Otherwise, you're obstructing
their
process.
Ability to investigate. Okay.
Anyway, yes. So
he contacted you after spending many hours on the phone and emails, etc., getting really nowhere with this. And as he wrote, his point was that if they didn't even follow the most basic checks, why must I now be expected to waste my time and effort and money proving that it wasn't me who answered this account?
So a few people responded to that X post of Louis to say, get hold of Wendy. So he did, and he told me that on the 20th of May, MTN's call center sold a fraudulent contract under his name without doing any checks, any verification, without supporting documents. And this was, as I said, a 45,000 rand cell phone that he's now left paying for, plus the contract. They are refusing to investigate unless I jump through hoops and send them a police affidavit, etc. I've spent hours on phone calls and 3 weeks of non-existent customer service and stonewalling behavior. My main point is that they didn't, as we said, follow the most basic checks. Why are they expecting me to spend so much time proving that it wasn't me? He also wanted to know, why did MTN not request me to accept or reject a debit check for a debit order to be raised against his bank account? What happened was, the financial implications of what happened was, the real Louis had his bank account debited at the end of June in the amount of 1,626. It was an expensive package, obviously, which is great if someone else is going to pay for it for you. And MTN then wanted a copy, as I said, of his ID or passport, not older than 3 months old, certified copy, and a police affidavit.
Now, look, obviously it's annoying to have to jump through those hoops and go to a police station and sign an affidavit and get copies certified and all of that. Wendy, is it unreasonable of MTN to ask for those documents?
No, it wasn't unreasonable. They were following their protocols, but clearly they could have been more engaging with him in terms of his why and how was it allowed to happen. So I asked the question because he wasn't getting the answers that he wanted. And the answer I got from, and somebody told him in the fraud division of MTN, said, we have to go do this because many people claim that they were victims of fraud when in fact they can't afford their contracts and they're trying to get out of them.
Oh, okay. That's a whole different angle.
So if it's established as fraud, they have to clear you of the debt. But clearly so that was their reason for saying, we have to make you
verify who you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So MTN told me, I asked them, is it true that the person who impersonated Louis was able to get his application approved despite not presenting any documentation? And the answer was, from our investigation on the matter, the application was done via one of MTN's sales partners. For online and telesales agreements, the customer would need to supply an identity document at the point of delivery. In other words, when the device is delivered by the courier company. In this case, the fraudster produced an ID on delivery, which we copied. As we conducted our investigation, we reviewed the documents and got confirmation that Louis had been a victim of ID theft and fraud. We can confirm that the line has been deactivated and a credit has been passed to him for all fraudulent charges. So you might notice they're talking about what the recipient had to provide in terms of a copy of an ID in order to get his hands on the phone.
Yeah.
But they didn't answer the question of what was he required to produce in terms of verification in order to get that contract opened in the first place. So I went back and said, please answer that. And the answer I got was really interesting. And it went like this. The telephonic application process involves a proof authentication method, customer engagement. It's known as KBA, knowledge-based authentication, which is a set of questions, we're all familiar with these, associated with the customer's credit bureau profile. These questions are asked to ascertain whether the correct person is being engaged with based on the responses. And if answered correctly, the application is passed through the journey. We've requested the call recording for this transaction from the sales partner and we will review it for any anomalies. And this is the bit that really grabbed my attention. It is important to note that in a typical case of ID theft, the fraudster purporting to be the customer would already have knowledge of these questions, as this information is held with a credit bureau typically. What they're not saying there is, well, we don't expect our credit bureau information to be available to fraudsters, but it actually is, as I stated when we started chatting about this topic. So we have to accept that if you are credit active, you've got a credit profile, it is in the hands of fraudster or fraudsters, and they will sooner or later, as in my case, attempt to use it to open an account or phone you to get into your keys to your safe into your account. So my question is, well, why are we still sticking with this? Why not add extra layers of security? To summarize, said MTN, the customer would be required to indicate the ID number on the call. The system would pull up the KBA question or information, and then finally the identity document would need to be produced upon delivery. Those steps were followed in this case with a green barcode ID produced on delivery. So there's a fake ID old book in Louis' name. Either he lost it or it's been cloned or something. So what I actually haven't said to Louis yet, and I know he's listening, is that he really, and anyone else who's had their ID books either used it in a fraud or lost them, must go to the South African Fraud Prevention Service, the SAFPS. If you just put those letters in, it will come up. If you're on your phone, it's actually easier. You can, within minutes, apply for protective registration. So you provide your own identity and even a picture, and yes, it's very safe. And so that if somebody wants to open an account in your name, including yourself, there's a red flag, and they then have to be checked with, and additional questions asked, etc. Additional forms of ID requested, so so that this kind of fraud
can't happen.
Yeah, can't happen, or less likely to happen.
So Louis has been listening, and let's bring him in at this point very quickly before we go to the headlines. Louis, thanks for your patience, and thank you for being willing to share the story with us this afternoon. What do you make of that response from MTN saying that there were all these security steps, there were security questions asked, and the person was able to clear those questions? How do you feel hearing that response?
That's a very interesting response. Throughout the months I was dealing with them, every single time I asked exactly the same question regarding what documents were received, and I want a copy of the documents. First of all, they said to me from the fraud department, there's absolutely no documents. That was 6 weeks after the contract was sold. I was told later by fraud that 24 hours after it's sold, all documents will be on the system. So bear in mind, this was 6 weeks later. So I, up to today, have been asking what documents were received, and I want a copy. So my bank can also investigate. And I'm not getting an answer. I'm absolutely getting stonewalled. So the interesting thing with all the responses is that they don't really answer the question. There's only an ID that was produced apparently on delivery of the phone. According to our legal processes and MTN's own published process, they should have an ID, proof of residence, and bank statements when the contract is sold. With their silence on this, I'm not sure what documents they actually received.
According to them, when it's done over the phone, they don't require that documentation. They just require you to, the only verification that's done is to ask you those knowledge-based questions based on what appears in your credit bureau. So, what accounts do you have? Which was your bank, and that kind of, what day does your debit order go off? All of that will be able to be found on someone's credit record. And so when those questions are correctly answered, then the contract is approved. But what's interesting to me is they're saying that the fraudsters have access to that information. So clearly they need to change that in order to protect their own customers from fraud, and also with people that aren't their customers.
Yeah. Louis, if I may ask, I mean, that first debit order went off at the end of June. What happened at the end of July? Did another debit order go off, or was there an attempt of any kind?
Yes. So the contract was sold on the 20th of May. On the 29th of June, The first debit order of 1626 went off, which I'd reversed by my bank. And incidentally, this bank account that was used, I've never ever used. I've never received the email statement, used account, nothing. So for my bank to investigate, we need what documents I received. But, okay, so the debit order went off 29th of June, which I'd reversed, plus now it's bank charges that I'm paying. On end of July, they again attempted to do the debit order, which was reversed. And then a few days later in the week, they tried to do a double debit order of 3,600 something, which was then reversed. It said bank serve, which I think was when MTN finally finalized this, so they reversed it.
Okay.
So there's been 3 attempts.
Okay.
And no more, hopefully. Hopefully that is the end of it.
Let's hope it was the end of it.
Okay. And let's hope that, Louis, I hear what you're saying, that your bank is asking to see the documents that were used to open and lodge this debit order so that they can reverse it legally. But it's very frustrating that after all this time, Louis still isn't getting those straight answers that he's looking for. Quite a number of WhatsApps coming in from people saying #me too. Kelly saying, this happened to me with Vodacom. I had to get all of those documents to prove that it wasn't me who opened the contract. They said it was a third-party company that sold the contract. I've never had a contract with Vodacom. The fraudster didn't have my bank details, so nothing was coming off my account, but Vodacom wanted to hand me over for non-payment.
Yeah.
I was really stressed about being handed over, so I complied with their requests and jumped through the hoops to get all those documents. It was quite stressful because I am pedantic about these things. Kelly, quite stressful is an understatement. I mean, really. Somebody else saying, I had the same experience as Louis with MTN. Debit orders went off despite my declining the debit check from MTN and
so
blocking it with my bank. MTN also refused to answer any questions or provide me any copies of documents.
I don't
My
think that's
only
acceptable.
recourse in the end was to close my bank account and get protective registration.
Yep.
So that's obviously there's a big red flag there in their systems, Wendy, that if customers are asking for, if you're asking customers to go and jump through these hoops to prove it, I think it's only fair that the customers should be able to say to you, well, please, will you produce the documents to explain how this happened?
Yeah, absolutely. You're being held responsible for an account. Show me how it was opened. And also just for your own protection going forward, what information of mine is out there, what documentation was produced. But we've now learned through this case of Louis that when it's taken out over the phone, if they got access to your credit bureau information and they happen to have be able to produce an ID document to show when the hardware, the laptop or the phone or whatever it is delivered to them, then they're for away. So in that story with Louis, he shared a lot of his correspondence with MTN officials around his case, and one of them said, because he was pushing back on some, proving that it was fraud with his ID, etc. And the man said, well, it is the case that many people who complain of who allege that it's a fraudulent account are actually, it's not a fraud. They did take it out, but they just can't afford it anymore and they want it to be written off. So I went and that was one of the other questions that I pursued with MTN to say, how often, how many, on an average month, how many, my first question was, what percentage of alleged fraudulent contracts or upgrades are found to be legitimate customers who are just trying to get, pretending it was fraud, and they
trying to back out of a contract
exactly,
they can't afford.
Yeah,
Okay.
just alleging it was fraud to get out of it. And I was told that we aren't. This information is not readily available. I think it must be available, but they just don't want to share it. We found that the majority of cases are fraud related, predominantly linked to billing or invoice, but it's not uncommon that fraud cases are related to customers having second thoughts on contracts.
That's very interesting.
So I'm actually thinking, I wonder if that was a typo. I must check that because it doesn't seem to. The but is mine. They just said it's not uncommon that fraud cases are related to customers.
So people take out a contract and then have a change of heart or realize they can't afford it any longer.
But it's
and
not the majority of cases.
Don't want to pay the penalties that come with cancelling, so
Yes.
rather try to pretend it was
I'm sure there
fraudulent.
is some of that, but they've said it's not. The majority of cases are genuinely fraud.
Did they tell you how many of these
Yes,
cases
I
they
asked, and I
investigate?
was expecting not to be told, but they did tell me. On average, between 1,000 and 1,200 cases of suspected fraud per month.
Sure.
These figures, says MTN, are in line with the industry benchmark as fraud continues to be a pervasive problem in South Africa and the rest of the world, as we know. What to do if you're a victim of fraud? It's there, 083 123 4357. In other words, 083 123 and then help. It's available on all their platforms. Or you email fraudhelp@mtn.com, and they're available to help between 7 in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week.
They're not the only company
No.
affected, so
So
I
I
know
thought-
you reached out to Vodacom
Yeah, I
as
thought, well, they're getting 1,000 to 1,200 fraud cases a month. What about Vodacom? They have average far fewer, on average a month, 230. And that includes fraudulent applications on new lines, add-on lines, and upgrades.
That's a big difference.
It is a big
Wendy.
difference. It might suggest that MTN is being targeted because it's easier. I mean, that would not be an outrageous assumption to make. So it's one that I didn't have time to pursue before we came on air, but I'm certainly going to try and find out, dig down into what their procedures are, because fraudsters will find a weakness where they can, right? So I think that discrepancy, because, you can't say, well, the one has a lot more subscribers than others, because it's irrelevant anyway. They're pretty on par. So yeah, it's very interesting. Big discrepancy there. And then I said to Vodacom, what's the best way to report it? It's their customer care line, 082 135, or fraud disputes at Vodacom.co.za. So you've got MTN, which is fraud help at MTN, and Vodacom is fraud disputes at Vodacom. They need a copy of your ID with 3 clearly visible sample signatures on it. They don't say it has to be certified, interestingly enough, but they do say in some cases more of fraud, they do want more documents. But I would say, sending off an email to frauddisputes at vodacom.co.za with a copy of your ID and 3 clear signatures on it would be a good starting point.
Now, speaking of signatures, David making that point, surely a signature would be required before MTN could enforce a contract or ask for payment?
Yeah, well, you'd think, but if you think about when you take out a contract as a bona fide person over the phone, and this is not an activity that I encourage, getting into contracts over the phone, they don't ask you for a signature. Your mandate, then the call recording becomes the mandate. Yeah.
Now, Wendy, you've been saying one thing to do is to register with the Fraud Prevention Service. I believe we've got a voice note responding to that. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Pippa. Hi, Wendy. It's very sad that our information is out there, but I have resigned myself to that fact. And I have registered with the South African Fraud and Prevention Service. But what is very concerning to me is that even after I registered with the Fraud and Prevention Service, I did open a contract with one of the cell phone providers. And I told them that I have this letter that you require to open any new account. And they didn't even ask for it. For me, that was very scary, because if these things exist to try and protect us and retailers are simply ignoring them, then we're in very big trouble.
That's very disappointing.
Definitely something for me to pursue with the CEO of the SAFPS, Marnie van Skalkwyk. He'll be very perturbed to hear that. So I will ask him how they monitor that and, keep engaging with their members. They're essentially their members, these credit providers.
Yeah. To the person who sent that, if you want to tell us which company it was that skipped that step effectively, please drop us an email. You can mail me on pippa.h@capetalk.co.za or mail Wendy on consumer@knowler.co.za, KNOWLER. Mike asking, Mike in Rondebosch, can you please tell us how to contact the SA Fraud Prevention Society to register? Well, their website, Mike, is safps.org.za for Southern African Fraud Prevention Service. And if you go to safps.org.za, their contact page has got phone numbers, it's got emails, it's got an online contact form, everything you can need, basically.
And applying for protective registration, which is easiest done on a smartphone.
Okay.
Literally, you can do it in a couple of minutes. I've done it myself.
Okay, so thanks for that advice, Wendy. So there we go, safps.org.za fraudsters.org.za. Now, Wendy, say the word telesales and most of us want to reach for a drink immediately, but this isn't actually a story about the people making the calls, or not necessarily so. It's an update on a case we looked at, I think it was several months ago now. Just remind us.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months ago, we discussed MultiChoice's third party marketing company on air. The complainant was Dudley, I remember.
Yes.
And so they called DSTV customers and tell them that for an extra few $100 or under $300 a month, they can get a new decoder with all the latest bells and whistles. Plus, and the words they use are access to platforms such as Netflix and Showmax. So you'd get their fancy little remote with all the different platforms buttons on, and then you just, it's all very quick and easy. So Dudley fell for it, and then he later discovered that, you've got the ability to access it with the decoder remote combination, but you still got to pay those platforms their
own subscriptions. So,
and he felt it was misleading, and I said, yeah, I do too. So I took it up with MultiChoice. This is their long-held third-party marketing company on air that we're talking about that make these calls, and she said. The spokesman initially said, yes, the agent pitched correctly as per the script. At no point did she say that the 239 subscription is included with Netflix and Amazon. And I went back to say, well, in my opinion, saying that the extra 250 Rand that the customer is committing to for the decoder gives them access to various platforms, doesn't tick the full disclosure box, because many people would assume that it was all part of what they're paying extra per month. Full disclosure would say, yes, you will have access to these extra at an extra cost, right? If you really wanted people to understand what they were agreeing to, what the offer was. So eventually she said, did this MultiChoice spokesman say, yes, that she'd pushed for and it was accepted that the script had been amended. Wonderful. And we said that, and we thought that was the end of the story. But if you think about it, and I took her word for it, and I'm sure it was genuine, but how do you know unless I get the call? That would have been first prize. But second prize was my partner getting the call. And he had his phone on
speaker.
No, he didn't, but I could hear, yes, I've got a decoder. And I thought, okay.
This is what it is.
Put it on speaker. Let me listen. And so I'm gesticulating to him and saying, and she actually says, and you'll get this amount of money and you get access to Netflix and Showmax and Amazon. And I said, prompting him, does that include the subscription? And she said, no, the subscription's extra. And he said, well, I think that's misleading then. You should say that it's extra. Don't say it gives me access to, because it makes it sound like it's all included. So she goes, okay. But anyway, and she carries on with her thing. So, of course, like a shot, I almost felt sorry for MultiChoice. Went back and said, what is this?
You haven't amended the script.
From May you would. This was last month. So it was 2 months on. And the response was, unfortunately, the agent did not adhere to the new script in this case. Our risk and compliance team conducted an audit and confirmed that the script change was rolled out at the end of May. As previously communicated, this was an isolated incident where the sales script agent, being with us for 9 months, so with the old script and now with the new, reverted to the old script out of habit. Why do you deviate from what's written in front of you, though? Habit? We recognize the gravity of incidents like these, says MultiChoice. And then there was a positive outcome, I think. And again, I will have no way of knowing unless I get the call or someone I know and am around does. In our ongoing effort to mitigate this, we're also implementing voice recognition software to audit 100% of sales and non-sales calls for compliance. It's expected to be operational by now. So it's August.
August. Okay, well, that's good news indeed. But I mean, I'm also sitting here going, if you are replacing a script, surely you delete the old one.
Yes.
You take it out of the hands of the agents so that it can't be accidentally opened up and used again.
Yeah, and by habit, why would you deviate from a new script? Why would you then leave out words that are on a page in front of you saying, please note there will be an extra cost for these access to these platforms.
Yeah.
So the answer was troubling.
Look,
but at least it's flagged.
If we give the benefit of the doubt, it was a mistake by the agent. If we're not feeling as gracious, it was a deliberate.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But I really do hope that they are now auditing all of the calls, because I listened to it in real time and I could definitely I would definitely say that it's misleading.
So just to reiterate, if you get that call from MultiChoice offering you this package with access to Netflix and Showmax,
And they don't mention it that it
what
comes
they
with an
mean
extra
is that the remote has a button which will enable you to
Yes.
use it for Netflix should you choose to take out a Netflix subscription separately.
for a new decoder at like 200 and whatever a month, and then you're going to have. Don't think that. I mean, I suppose you could argue that would be the deal of
a lifetime.
Yes, but still, don't tick that full disclosure box. Rather over explain, which is not generally the forte of telesales
I'm sure.
agents.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, Wendy, while we're talking about Showmax, it just reminded me of an email I received from Jenny. And just in closing, I'm going to quickly share this with listeners in case it might help anybody else from making the same mistake that Jenny unwittingly did. Jenny wrote to me to say, we recently reactivated Showmax, paying for the higher fee so that we can watch it on our Hisense TV. But when we tried to launch the pre-installed app on that TV, the screen went black and reverted to the app home screen. After much running around looking into the issue, it seems there is a problem with Hisense TV specifically and Showmax. My TV is still under guarantee, and since the Showmax app comes pre-installed and cannot be uninstalled, I believe my expectation that the app should work is reasonable. But Hisense just tells me to buy a Google-approved box. If I'd wanted to do that, I would have bought a cheaper, non-smart TV and a box a long time ago. She goes on to say Showmax was really great at refunding our money, but they won't explain if the app is the problem or just the TV. So the reason for flagging it is to say, please do your research properly if you are thinking of investing in a Hisense smart TV with the pre-installed Showmax app. Be aware of the possibility that it might not work. I think it's something people should be aware of, she writes, before they spend their money.
Absolutely, and that's a real public service announcement.
Jenny, thank you for taking the time to share that with us.
Yeah.
Nice way to wrap up the show today, Wendy. As always, thank you for all the work you do on behalf of so many of our listeners. If you want to reach Wendy, remember you can send an email to consumer@knowler.co.za, spelled KNOWLER. She's not able to respond to every single email, but we really do try our hardest to find the ones that are common, recurring problems that have got very widespread impact and deal with as many of them as we can. The other thing to do is to reach out to Wendy via her Facebook page, which is Wendy Knowler Consumer. We'll chat again next week, Wednesday.
Will
Wendy.
do.
Thanks.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson
on Cape Talk.